Chapter 15. Families. It was a beautiful evening as the golden sunlight shimmered over the waters, and across the waters could be seen a snow-capped island that was the home of Vixie Reddington and the other ethnically Arctic fox kitsunes. But from the coastal view, Buck, Natalia, began to see the Chianti grape vineyards that surrounded Catherine Ringtail's villa, and upon seeing the house, the stone that made up the walls and was held together with mortar, as the tile roof was like that of a Spanish mission, and around the villa and its entering courtyard were a variety of trees, ranging from walnut, lemon, olive, and magnolias. And in the center of the courtyard was a fountain making the sound of a gentle stream of water, and over the courtyard were the strings of incandescent lights, giving a warm glow to the inviting atmosphere. And although Buck remembered the many times he had spent summers in his mother's villa, and thought nothing of it, Natalia felt as if she was stepped back in time to the Spanish conquistadors. But despite the Tanukis having never been conquistadors, Catherine Ringtail still kept stuffed fox heads of every species hung on the walls of the grand dining room, although with the heads of a moose, deer, and jackalope. But what disturbed Natalia a little bit was, unlike the other wall-mounted animal heads, the red fox, instead of saying red fox, said Inari. But apart from the animal heads in the dining room, there was a ceiling-high glass cabinet filled with wines from all over the world, and an ornate ashtray that was clean because Catherine didn't smoke. And in her kitchen were only the most professional-grade appliances, with the most expensive of porcelain plates and dishes. Natalia then silently questioned within herself, how could you have given up such a good life? While remembering her own childhood. And even though her father was a successful entrepreneur founding Bootleg Brewery, he never indulged himself nor his family in luxury, even though he could afford it. And instead, Natalia's father, Julius Whitetail, would reinvest the money into his community, employees, and the church, following the custom for anyone of high class in Tanuki society. For unlike the Kitsune clan, which saw the lower class as a means to give the upper class face, the Tanukis saw each other as each other's servant, and that he who is of high standing shall not hoard wealth lest he dishonor the God who made him and gave him everything he has. For such was life in the Tanuki clan, and still is. And among Catherine's living space was a large brick fireplace, with all manner of family portraits going all the way back to the 1600s, when the Ringtail family began to gain its prominence. Catherine then invited Natalia to sit down with her in her living room, when one of the maids brought out some cannoli and coffee. And not to be rude, Natalia took a bite of her cannoli and a sip of her coffee, even if she tried not to show her disdain for coffee. Catherine then asked, as the fireplace crackled with an oak log burning, "So, you're an American girl. That explains why you're dressed the way you are. But now I'd like to know more about you, because my son seems to like you little more than a friend. Because as any woman of significant age knows, when you marry someone, you don't just marry the person but their whole family. So tell me, what is your family like?" Natalia then noticed the genuine curiosity and concern for her son on Catherine's expression and answered, "My father is a person who's always been a good part of my life. Sure, we had our disagreements from time to time, but we were always able to have honest dialogue and work these things out. And although he could afford to give me and my little brothers a life of immense luxury with the profits he earned from his business, he didn't want us to grow up that way because he believed we should learn to value each other in honest work. I also remember he used to say things like, 'If you hoard your wealth, you're stealing someone else's money.' And he would actually live it in using the profits he earned from both our family and many people within my community. He isn't the type of greedy executive that rewards successful employees with pizza parties while he hoards the profits for himself, but actually rewards his employees with a share of increased company profits." Catherine then interjected, That really says a lot about him. And if he were to live in Tanuki society, he would be held in very high regard. But what about his piety? I care about my son, and I'd rather not allow him to marry into an impious family or a family of unbelievers. And having done some reading into American society, I am aware that there are a collection of heterodox sects calling themselves Protestants and denounce the church while claiming an incomplete Bible as their authority. Natalia then answered assertively, I can guarantee you he's no heterodox. If anything, he has a habit of privately saying Protestants aren't Christians, because of how they seem to act more like a political party using the Christian language than a church. He even got into a heated argument with Father Dahl at my home parish over a decision to receive a former Protestant through confirmation rather than baptism. And then he went to confession afterwards, after Father Dahl corrected him that rebaptizing anyone who has already been baptized in the name of the Holy Trinity is a sacrilege. He would never have us eat together without saying grace, and he always stressed living a pious and upstanding life, and even lived it, even if imperfectly. The only thing I can really say he does wrong is that he's a bit of a glutton when it comes to delicious food. I think having a love of food is something that's universal to everyone. But about your father getting into a heated argument with a priest over such matters, it does make sense if he originally came from the Tanuki clan. As you can probably see, there isn't much confusion over matters of faith and morals here. You're either a Christian or you are not, and you're either living morally or immorally. We also don't have this in-between state called Protestantism. The closest thing the people here have experienced to Protestantism are the followings of Apollonius and Corvin Severall, neither of which are considered genuine Christians and have always been received through baptism and confirmation. But since I saw you at the liturgy with Metropolitan Onesimus, what did you think of it from an outsider's perspective? Natalia then tried to think of something, trying not to sound like a snob. I'd say rather ethnic. I am unfamiliar with traditional Tanuki liturgical chant, having only experienced Gregorian and Latin chanting myself. But about the announcement, why was it such a big deal? Two priests' families arrived at a monastery in the Kitsune clan. Catherine then went blank-faced. You don't know, do you? Of course I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Catherine then made an expression of indifference towards the Kitsune clan and said, The Kitsune clan is spiritually and morally dead. So, when one of our friars went there and reported an anomaly of an influx of catechumens, it was unexpected news, so much so that the bishop stopped everything he was doing when he found out what had happened. And what had happened was that we found out that one of the chief executors of that image of degeneracy, Inari, is a Christian, and a very pious one at that, along with her husband and her servant. Upon hearing this, it took everyone by surprise, because as far as we knew, the Kitsune clan was basically irredeemable, with no point in even trying to save it and just waiting for it to die. After all, why should we care about the people who only gave us repeated injury and live so arrogantly that they think that they're better than us? Natalia then felt something twisting in her stomach as she thought of an answer. I might not know much about what happened between us Tanukis and those Kitsunes, but I have enough life experience to know just how dangerous single stories are. I can't fathom why Friar Victor returned to his homeland indefinitely under Onesimus's oversight. But is there anything I know about Friar Victor? He's the good in people almost no one can see. And maybe he saw there was still something in the Kitsune clan worth saving. Catherine then cringed at Natalia's suggestion. What about a culture of complete degeneracy is worth saving? So, I'm at a loss for ideas why Friar Victor has chosen to return to his already dead homeland. The only thing I can think of is that he has, at his advanced age of 1,000 years old, he needs to emotionally mourn the death of his clan before he faces his particular judgment. And I totally get that, even if the place of your home no longer exists in the way it once was. I just hope he doesn't stay for too long and dies there, because someone as respectable as him deserves a proper burial in the Tanuki clan, where his body won't be desecrated by those uncivilized and unchristian savages. Natalia then tried to use her strong intuition to read between the lines of what Catherine was saying and thought about what it could mean. Sure, she had heard about the degeneracy and the decadence of the Kitsune clan, but could they really be as bad as Catherine's tone was letting on? And then Natalia got a feeling in her heart and said, maybe he did return because he wanted to see his clan one last time. But what from I know about him personally, it's probably a bit more complicated than that. Friar Victor isn't someone who gives up easily, especially when it's something important to him like the salvation of his own people. He'd put in every effort possible he could for them, even if it kills him. And that's why I think he returned to his clan and why he has so many catechumens. Then as someone as great as Friar Victor, who raised Moshi the Blacktail, is either going to do some miracle by divine providence and make those degenerate kitsunes like us Tanukis, or he's just going to be another statistic in the long chain of failed missions for the past 300 years. So, I hope you're right, and that I am wrong. But from what I have heard about the Kitsune clan from informants who have been there recently, I am not optimistic about the future of the Kitsunes. Dinner at the Ringtail Villa. As was standard Tanuki hospitality, Catherine gave Natalia the best food and drink, while giving herself only things of common food. For to be stingy and selfish at the best of the table toward strangers was to treat them not as people with dignity, but as less than oneself. That was unless you were a kitsune, because to be a kitsune is to be the embodiment of someone who can never be satisfied nor grateful, and therefore undeserving of even a roof over their head. Such is life in the Tanuki clan. Then Catherine, being the highest esteemed member of the Ringtail household, now that her husband was imprisoned and divorced, made the sign of the cross and said grace before biting into her food. Natalia then looked at her food, having never had Tanuki clan cuisine, with its sweet and spicy aroma, but not wanting to be rude, started eating anyway. Catherine then said to Natalia, I hope you're hungry, because we have multiple courses to go through tonight, so don't stuff yourself, unless of course you want to hibernate for a few days. Natalia then looked confused and asked, Hibernate? What are you talking about? Catherine then looked at Natalia shocked. You've never hibernated before? This is an atrocity. Now I'm going to need you to stuff yourself so you can try it. Sure, your belly is going to get a bit rotund, but you'll probably gain 10 pounds of food inside you. But it'll all come off after 3 days of hibernating. I guarantee you'll love it and have a 3-day-long dream and getting the best sleep of your life. I sometimes do it every so often after a stressful few weeks. Natalia then thought about it and was open to experience and said, All right, I'll not go on a diet tonight and stuff myself. That's the spirit. Now enjoy the food, won't you? Natalia then followed Catherine's instructions and ate. And to her surprise, because of her Tanuki physiology, her stomach didn't hurt from eating so much food. And after eating so much food, her lean and toned stomach was quite rotund as she felt her body temperature dip and energy drop. So, Catherine led Natalia to a guest room with the comfiest bed imaginable, as she drifted off into a deep sleep, ready to rest and wake up a few days later, feeling reinvigorated like she's never felt before, and her body back into its normal, lean, and toned self. Inari and Executor Vixie. If there's anything I like about Vixie, it's that she has exceptional people skills. Sure, she's not the most efficient executor in my inner circle of executors, but she clearly has herself put together. Or it could be a facade she just puts up around me as not to bother other people. I'd much rather have her as my chief executor than our little sister Zenko. Sure, our sister is very likable, but she clearly can't make up her mind about anything. She's so absorbed with her own personal feelings it's like remembering the past and structure doesn't mean anything to her. She's definitely someone I want as far from an executor position as possible. Now Vixie on the other paw hand. She's very decisive and very insightful, although I wish she would tell me more of how she comes up with her conclusions so quickly and so accurately without empirical evidence constantly in front of her, with me only finding facts to prove her insights later. Only rarely are her insights wrong, but I guess that's why it's important to double-check her conclusions. But if I were to make a bet on choosing anyone to make a good decision with the power they have been given, as one of my 9 executors, I'd choose Vixie every time. And here's why I trust Vixie in my place for the time being, as I am researching the origins of the keys of prosperity so they can be destroyed. They are as follows. Vixie is extremely principled, so emotionally intelligent it's scary, willing to listen to other perspectives, rational like myself, if a bit slower, absurdly self-controlled, and someone who knows her place while being flexible. I honestly don't know what I would do without her in her position, so she's clearly one of the best decisions I have made to have her on my council of executors. Of course, there are some problems with her as well, such as her seeming to have less priority for efficiency, with more focus on quality of life and less attention to fine details and being overly critical of herself. But with civil servants with those skills under her command, these are non-issues. Besides, she's too smart to be relegated to paper pushing, which is a better fit for people who can't see the bigger picture and think for themselves. But about her husband, Todd Reddington. He's a Ninetales I particularly don't like. I don't like him because he seems suspicious to me, like his lack of logic when it comes to making decisions. Like, can you at least think things through and implement plans that make sense, instead of trying to make everyone feel good? Sure, Vixie has a little bit of a problem with that too, but not as much as her husband. Doesn't he realize he has more important things to do than trying to make everyone happy when you just can't make everyone happy? To be clear, I don't hate Todd or anything, but I find him very annoying and irritating, regardless of whether or not his intentions are pure. But about their family. It makes me wonder if I ever had a family and didn't remain a 1,000-year-old virgin. It's not like I'd have a hard time finding a man. I'm well aware Todd's masturbate to pictures of my gorgeous body even though I'm fully clothed, and then proceed to make lewd fan art of me. But something about me wishes for something more than simply chasing after sex, which I could easily get. It's like I long for something deeper than just someone's body and achieving orgasms. And it feels as if I was never really loved for who I am, but merely what I can do with my immense abilities and my gorgeous body. I'm not even sure if I even know myself all that well because of how much time I've invested into running the clan that I forgot the reason I'm even doing it in the first place. But another reason I'm interested in a family was because of what I've learned about my bright paw hand man Blondie and what he went through when he was growing up. He never had a close relationship with his mother, and never really had someone close to him in his life. So I thought I should be there for him. I want to know what it's like to be a mother even though I am too old to have kids, and will live with regrets for possibly the rest of my life. But maybe treating Blondie like my son can help me cope with that. So whenever he's lonely or needs something, I'll be there for him. And if he needs me to hold him, wrap him in my fluffy tails, I will help him drift off to sleep. I want to provide what's best for him, and right now that's feeling like he has a family. So I'll be that for him. As for you, if you didn't become a monk, I think you would have become a great father. But even if you can't have a blood family, a spiritual family would be a second best. So, I'm asking your bishop if he can make you a priest, so you can become the spiritual father to the kitsunes that have chosen to follow after you. After all, I'd much rather have the spiritual father to the Christians in our clan be one of our own people rather than foreigners. Even if the two Tanukis Onesimus sent us have been well adjusted and cognizant of our customs and culture. I know the Okami you serve is important to you, and it seems he's the only one that seems to care after Okami Inari seems to have abandoned us for our impurity. So perhaps the Okami you serve has given you some hope for the future of our clan. After all, even though I'm made in the image of Inari, I can't see how much that matters anymore. Without Okami Inari, being made in her image has reduced us to what the Tanukis once were before our people gave them the unmerited gift of civilization. Nothing more than hunters and gatherers, pleasing their own immediate visceral desires, sub-kitsune. And in this increasingly sub-kitsune culture growing out of our once great civilization, if your Okami has been able to civilize the most barbaric people like the Aztecs and the Mayans, perhaps he can bring us back from the dead and give us a new life and life abundantly. And if your Okami proves to bring a true prosperity greater than Okami Inari, then I will burn the ancient and great Inari shrine to the ground and swear absolute allegiance to the Okami you serve. Love, your sister Inari. Did you know this? Inari's belief system, the religious belief system Inari holds, is actually loosely based on Shintoism. Such examples of this are in how she stresses the importance of ritual purity and cleanliness. It's also apparent by her belief in kami, which are a kind of spirit behind phenomenon, whether natural or in civilization. As such, referring to herself as image of Okami Inari, she is saying she is the conduit by which the major Okami Inari is channeled through, much like how in many pagan societies, the king was seen as the image of the gods that they would speak and act through. So when Inari speaks of her own clan's impurity as well as her own as being a barrier to their well-being, she is coming from a perspective of ritual purity and moral purity, as being a prerequisite to receive help from the kami. So when she looks at Christianity, she is not coming from a perspective of having knowledge of what it's all about, but more so seeing Christ as a very powerful and merciful kami that has the power to civilize her people. Christianity civilized the world. Although not politically correct, historically Christianity has a history of civilizing even the most barbaric civilizations, such as the Norse, ancient British, Russians, and American indigenous cultures. Before Christianity came to the Americas, the Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas would regularly engage in blood rituals involving human sacrifice, and all manner of barbarism. Their culture was so depraved that when the Spanish conquistadors arrived and brought Roman Catholicism, the indigenous people willingly converted and then proceeded to overthrow their own culture and embrace the Spanish and Catholic way of life. So when Inari mentions Christ civilizing barbaric people like the Aztecs and the Mayans, she's specifically referring to this. Eastern concept of face. This refers to a cultural concept in Oriental cultures such as Japan, China, and Korea, as well as collectivist cultures in general. The concept of face is one of collective honor, where the image of self before other people is everything. So, in Kitsune society, which is loosely based off the original source material, the same concept of face is common that the folklore where kitsunes in their society advance by improving their image before other kitsunes. This often entails willingly lying and withholding the truth in order to save face and avoid embarrassment. And in the concept of the Dark Mage, I wanted to explore this concept and how toxic such a way of living is in the Kitsune clan, with how it is literally becoming a wall to owning up to their problems and not fixing the root cause of them in order to save face, as what Inari was doing and why she was so stressed out at the beginning of the story. So, Friar Victor, being a Christian monastic with his solemn vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, the concept of face literally means nothing to him. So he serves as a natural foil to his sister Inari, but more so in a respectful manner towards his sister rather than an antagonistic foil. Similarly, Vixie also serves as a foil to the toxic form of this concept of face, in the face that her good face comes from her good character and honorable actions, rather than some pretentious cause to appear good before other kitsunes like Inari. This also has to do with Vixie being a pious Christian, and taking Jesus' instructions seriously when he said, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them, otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven," in Matthew 6, verse 1. In essence, the difference between Inari and Vixie is that Inari does her good works in order to give herself face before other people, whereas Vixie is actually virtuous and does what she does because she believes what she is doing is good and has the humility to admit when she's wrong and change accordingly.